A fisherman was sitting on the bank of a river in a large and lonely state park. He was there just relaxing. He wanted to do some fishing, nothing in particular supposedly. At some point in the afternoon, he heard a sound that didn't fit at all with that place. It was someone crying, a muffled sob coming from somewhere near the riverbank. The fisherman stood still, not really knowing what to do. Shortly after, he heard a gunshot, a single shot, and silence fell again. He then walked toward the sound and found a bag near the riverbank. He opened it, and inside he found an identity document. The name belonged to a 30-year-old woman who lived more than 100 kilometers from there, and who, until that morning, seemed to be organizing her life to move forward. I'm Marcos Campos, and this is the story of a woman who drove alone more than 100 kilometers to a park she had never been to before. She bought a gun before going there that same day and called emergency services asking them to track her cell phone so her family could find the body. The death was classified as a suicide. Case closed then? But is it really? Why did her family refuse to accept that version? Could it be because of the things this woman was doing? Filing complaints against the police in the months before? And that nobody did anything and we're going to investigate together now? So go ahead and leave a like, a comment, even if it's just an emoji. Become a member of the channel if you can. Every week there are several stories like this here. Enough with the data, let's get to the facts. Mika. Her name was Mika Miller. She was born in '94 in Kansas. She came from a family of 6 children, with 1 brother and 4 sisters. According to the accounts of those who knew her, Mika was the kind of person who always filled the room with energy. She liked hiking, rappelling, skydiving, and running. She even agreed to be vegan for a whole year just to prove she could do it. In other words, she had her own quirks. It seems that just from this brief description I'm giving, does it feel disconnected from the scene I described at the start of the episode? Well, let's continue the investigation here because there's still a lot more to come. And then you can tell me what you think in the comments. When Mika's family moved to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, she was still very young and already got involved with the church activities there, a church called Solid Rock, and as she grew older, she ended up becoming a central figure in that congregation. She led the worship, took care of the church's graphic design, and coordinated both the women's and youth ministries. Everything that appeared on the screens during the services, it was all her creation. At a certain point in her life, Mika then married the pastor of that church, John Paul Miller, known as JP, a guy 14 years older than her. And the two of them ran together a humanitarian mission in Africa that raised funds to support children in Kenya. Mika praised her husband's sermons in public. He also spoke about her with a lot of affection from the church pulpit. Definitely the kind of image a congregation wants to see, right? Of their pastor and his wife. But in January 2023, for some reason, Mika separated from JP. In October of that same year, she filed for an official divorce. By March 2024, she recorded a video for Facebook saying that her life had been very difficult in the past few months and even years. But she was keeping her circle of close friends very small because she was still going through a lot in her personal life. At that point in her life, Mika was planning to move to Kenya, but first, she wanted to finish the whole divorce process. Her goal was to work as a missionary on her own, outside of the Solid Rock structure, right? That church where she met her husband, she grew up there and all. On April 25, 2024, her divorce papers with JP, I was going to say mayor, but he's a pastor, were finally ready, okay? But just 2 days after all the paperwork was ready and everything, something completely unexplainable was going to happen to her. April 27, 27. On the morning of that day, April 27th, a doorbell camera caught Mika leaving the apartment where she was living. She was dressed very casually, looking like she was going to work, her hair was done, and her posture was completely normal, just like any other day. Nothing in the footage indicates that anything out of the ordinary was going to happen. But around noon, she drove to a pawn shop in Myrtle Beach called Dick's Pawn Shop. She went inside. At around 12:12 p.m., she bought a 6-hour 9mm pistol and also a box of ammunition. She paid for all of it in cash, $571. Security cameras there recorded everything, okay? She left the store around 12:34 p.m. Her cell phone recorded a search right after that. The search was National Park near me. The result pointed to Lambert River State Park, more than 5,600 hectares of dense forest. Rio, up in Iso County, North Carolina, more than 100 kilometers north of Myrtle Beach, a place where Mika had never been before. At 1:06 in the afternoon then, her car was caught by cameras on a highway. At 1:27, she stopped at a roadside market in Mullins. She bought a drink there, filled up the car, and left at 1:35 to continue her trip. Then, at 2:54, the Robeson County Emergency Center received a call. It was Mika. She asked the operator if they could track her cell phone. She said she was going to kill herself and wanted her family to be able to find her body afterwards. The operator tried to keep the conversation going, but Mika hung up. The emergency center tried to call back, but no one answered. Police officers were then dispatched at 3:03 p.m. They arrived at the park around 3:30 in the afternoon, and then the search began with the park rangers and drones, and it was there. That's when they found the fisherman I introduced to you at the beginning of the story. That guy who had heard crying, a gunshot, then found a bag with the identification documents and so on. Shortly after, Mika's body was found in the water. The gun was also in the water near the body. The serial number matched the case found on the passenger seat of Mika's car. A box of ammunition was in the center console. In the car's glove compartment, the receipt from that day. Mika was 30 years old. And in light of all this, I ask, was that a closed case of self-inflicted death? Or was there more to it and the case was just beginning? Well, that's what the investigation needed to answer, right? And look, the investigation was really quick, okay? The police reconstructed Mika's entire route using security cameras and cell phone records. The medical examiner examined her body and reported that the injury was indeed consistent with a self-inflicted gunshot. The death was officially classified as a suicide on May 7th. The police, as is standard procedure, also checked where Mika's husband was that day. JP had traveled to Charleston the day before for an event there and such. He spent the night there. Highway cameras that capture car license plates. They recognized, or rather captured, Pastor JP's pickup truck on the road around 2:22 a.m. on the 27th, more than half an hour before Mika's call to emergency services. Witnesses confirmed that he was accompanied the whole time, so he wasn't near the park either. He wasn't even in the same state either, right? JP's lawyer released a statement saying that the police's conclusion completely exonerated the pastor, that the accusations circulating on the internet were all unfounded and laughable. And he even threatened to sue anyone or any media outlet that kept publishing those things, which he called defamatory statements. It was suicide, period. Husband with a solid alibi, lawyer threatening to sue everyone. All signs pointed to the case ending right there, didn't they? Even though Mika had plans, according to the people who knew her, and she had no reason to do what she did to herself, and that's exactly why. That despite all of this, something was still really bothering us. After all, there's always a but, isn't there? The family didn't accept it. One of Mika's sisters went to court asking to be named the administrator of her estate. In her statement, she wrote that her sister had suffered abuse and violence, and that Mika told her, on several occasions, a phrase that became significant in this case. If I end up with a bullet in my head, it wasn't me. It was JP. Mika's friends also came forward, saying that on the eve of her death, they were exchanging messages with her about going to church on Sunday, about helping with the car payment, about life moving forward. Anyway, a series of ordinary things. One of them said that Mika's last message didn't seem like it was from someone about to die. It seemed like it was from someone organizing their week. And inside the church itself, someone broke the silence too. Bernard Kennerson. He was an elder at Solid Rock, played bass in the worship band, and oversaw the church's daily activities. And on the night of the 27th, around 11:15 p.m., he received a call from one of JP's assistants. And this person reportedly said they needed a sermon ready for Sunday's service because Mika had died. Kennerson sat there, tried to process the information, and said that it was really bad. He then started to prepare something. Less than 10 minutes later, he received a text message from JP. It said that he was going to preach as usual the next day. So on Sunday morning, less than 12 hours after finding out that his wife had died, JP went up to the pulpit. At the church where it all began, he preached the entire sermon from beginning to end, without mentioning Mika, without pausing. The congregation listened to everything, just like they did with any other Sunday sermon, not knowing anything yet. When he finished, JP looked at the congregation and said he had an announcement that Mika had died, that her death had been, in his words, self-inflicted, that she was not mentally well, and he asked everyone to stand up and leave the church in silence, without talking about the matter among themselves. That moment was recorded, the video circulated on social media and was seen by millions of people. And that's when public opinion started to change. People began to find certain things strange, but not necessarily because of any evidence or testimony, but because of what was implied, you know? By the way that man announced his wife's death, apparently in a cold manner, with this sort of implicit control over the narrative, the request, or maybe even an order for silence. The entire congregation obeyed and left in silence.
We're not going to do an altar call today. Instead, I'm going to have you stand up and I'm going to make an announcement. And after the announcement, I'm going to ask that you leave church quietly and don't talk about the announcement here in the building, please, if you can, so you all can stand to your feet. Before I make the announcement, I also want to say that my request to you is that you will continue to come to church and serve and give for the next, little bit couple. I'm taking a little bit of a break. I don't want to have to worry about the church. My break may be a few days, a few weeks, I don't know. I got a call late last night. My wife has passed away. Yeah, it was self-induced and it was up in North Carolina. And we're going to have a funeral for her next Sunday here at 3 p.m. And so it's all I'm just kind of going on adrenaline right now. So y'all pray for me and my kids and everybody.
And y'all knew that she wasn't well mentally and that she needed her medicine. It was hard to get to her.
A few days later, at a meeting with the musicians from the church, Pastor JP said that all the commotion was the work of the devil and that it would pass in about 2 weeks or so. In other words, he was saying she was in a very bad state of mind. And there was also the memorial he organized at the church itself, at the same time Mika's family was holding another one. He went there at least 4 times, and in one of those times he tried to resuscitate her. He said that when he heard about the death, he thought Mika's family had made up the news. Kennerson, remember that guy who got the call to give a speech and all that? So, he was a key church member, as I said, right? He left, he took off. The congregation then, which according to the people there, used to reach almost 700 people, dropped to less than 50. Every Sunday, protesters started gathering in front of the church, holding signs asking for justice for Mika. It looks like things fell apart for JP, didn't they? JP was removed from his ministerial duties by a church supervisor, and then the main question took on a different tone. It was no longer about what happened to Mika Miller. It was about what this man was doing to Mika Miller before she died, what Mika had been trying to say. Remember how the marriage suddenly ended? You know the story from the very start, right? She arrived in the city when she was young, started doing volunteer work at the church, then met the pastor. We don't know when she met him. Then they started dating, got married, and then, out of nowhere, Mika decides to separate from him. She already wants the divorce papers so she can get out, wants to move to Kenya. Well, actually, it wasn't really that sudden. It was like this, okay? As you might have guessed already, the answer, or rather some of the answers, were in police reports that Mika had filed in the months before her death. And when those records started to come to light, what showed up was a pattern that no one on the outside knew about. But what bothers me the most is that when the police reports were filed, nothing actually happened to protect Mika. Check this out. In February 2024, Mika went to a Walmart in the area where they lived and supposedly left her car parked there. And on that same day, February 8th, she was involuntarily admitted to a psychiatric hospital. It's really like something out of a movie, you know, that scene where someone just stands there, kind of frozen, not knowing what to do. There's also the whole issue of psychological manipulation. It's really like the plot of a psychological horror movie, you know? Well, according to what Mika later told the police, the one who did all this and arranged for her to be committed was JP. She spent 2 days hospitalized, 48 hours. There aren't any public details about exactly how this happened, okay, guys? Whether she had gone to Walmart to shop, if she was surprised there, if for some reason she left her car parked there, or if she was somewhere else when she was hospitalized. Anyway, these details aren't really explored, okay? What is known is that when she was discharged from this hospitalization on February 10th, that is 2 days later, right? The hospital staff told her that her husband had been there during her stay, took her purse, where the car keys were. So Mika, when she left the hospital, went to Walmart and really found out that the car wasn't there anymore. She then reported it as theft. She sat down with the officer and explained everything that had been happening. Hospitalization, psychological manipulation, blackmail. The guy went there to get her purse, her car keys. Then the police officer called JP. Check this out. And the guy told them, right, he said that the two of them weren't legally separated, that Mika suffered from mental disorders, that she had yearly episodes where she became reckless, and that he wasn't going to return the car for a month. The police concluded that since the couple was still legally married, the car was joint property. Therefore, no crime had been committed. Guys, I've already presented several links in this criminal chain, but here's a huge one too, right? Yeah, like, if half of what I'm telling is actually true, we're looking at a case of extreme manipulation, right? Where his role as a pastor, you know, in a relatively small town where everyone knows each other, you know how it is. He has authority, right? The guy, as they say, has a lot of influence. Poor Mika in this situation, right? Less than 3 weeks later, Mika went back to the police with 2 reports on the same day. In the first one, she reported that her car tire had been damaged. In the second one, hours later, she reported that the car had been taken to a Honda dealership to fix the tire, without her having asked. And during the same period, a mechanic found a tracking device hidden in the car. Mika told the police that she feared for her own life because of several things her husband had been doing as she was trying to go through with the divorce. On that same day, exactly the same day as the tires and the tracker that was found, JP contacted Mika more than 50 times. 50 calls, man, messages, attempts to contact her in a single day. Every time Mika sought institutional help, JP had the same response. She was mentally ill. He said she was bipolar and became unstable off her medication. In a public interview, he said that, according to the doctors, she was potentially homicidal or suicidal. The Solid Rock Church itself filed a police report accusing Mika of diverting $1,199 in donations from the Kenya mission to her personal account. The police investigated and concluded that there was not enough evidence, but the record existed. And here I need to emphasize once again, of course, there are 2 sides to every story, but considering the way Mika's story ended, all these smaller links. When there's hostility from the other side, the police investigate and don't find any solid evidence. A dossier starts being built against the person making the accusation, right? Or don't you think so? Well, from the pulpit of the church, let's say, from his altar as a supreme entity. JP started using the Sunday sermons to talk about Mika, and then the real mess begins, right? Exposing her personal details in front of the whole church. According to court documents from a former member, he criticized Mika in his sermons, shared information about the couple's private life, and had them recorded to publish those sermons on the internet. I don't even think I need to say that this is obviously a huge case of psychological abuse, right, guys? But look, it gets even worse. This goes back to when she was 10. Remember that last detail from the February report, the one about the missing car when she left the hospital? I kept it until now for the following reason. In that conversation with the police officer, Mika didn't just talk about the car and the hospitalization, okay? That whole situation, which was more than unusual that day, she also said that she had known JP since she was 10 years old and that he had recruited her. That was the word she used, okay? I don't know what that means. While she was working, I know what it means, but I don't know what it means in this context. So he recruited her while she was working for him at the church over there at Solid Rock. Up to the point where the two got involved and got married. Mika's sister later said she believed that maybe she confused the age with the year. Like 10 years instead of 2010, she would have said. And that JP started getting close to Mika when she was around 14 or 15 years old. Anyway, one fact remains. JP is 14 years older than her, isn't he? So, if she was 14, he would already be 28, and this thing about her sister also kind of questioning Mika's word. It kind of seems like it even gives some credibility to what the pastor was saying, doesn't it? Anyway, that's the feeling I got. If you felt differently, please leave a comment here for me. But hold on, things are about to get grotesque now. When you reconstruct the timeline, here's what shows up, guys. Mika arrived in Myrtle Beach, that little church town. She was probably a teenager or preteen. She started attending Solid Rock and working for JP. She eventually became the babysitter for his children and his first wife, Allison Williams. She's a key figure here, and so is Allison. According to court documents that Allison herself, the pastor's ex-wife, presented in a custody case, JP started an affair with Mika while she was still the family's babysitter. Here we have a point that's unclear. We can't make big inferences here, but for those who know how to read between the lines, JP and Allison's marriage ended in 2016. In 2017, JP was already married to Mika. She was 23 years old at that time. Allison also stated under oath that JP had a history of chronic infidelity, including, according to her, relationships with prostitutes and sexually inappropriate conduct with underage members of his church there. It seems Mika was pulled into that by a system before being old enough for autonomy to decide whether she wanted to be there or not. A teenage girl who meets a pastor in his church, works for him, takes care of his children, and eventually marries him. Look, there are people who say, and they did say, as incredible as it may seem, that things unfolded naturally, but if what they said about the pastor is also true, then he's nothing but a damned worm, isn't he? But still, we need to rely on what's official, right? I know you must be wondering about her family, right? Sorry guys, I don't know how that happens, since I'm just inferring here, okay? Voices in my head, but think about it. In a small town context where you start attending a congregation, that trust, who's going to question the highest authority, right? So it creates a very easy environment for someone with a disturbed, wicked, and evil mind, doesn't it? Well, anyway, while all of this was coming to light, right? All the dirty laundry, the crap hitting the fan, the federal investigation was moving forward behind the scenes. Back in May 2024, the sheriff of the county where it all happened had asked for help from the U.S. Attorney's Office and to the FBI as well, saying that the detectives had found information that, although not directly related to the cause of death, deserved further investigation. Don't forget, guys, that all of this started coming to light because of Mika's supposedly self-inflicted death. In November 2024, FBI agents showed up at JP's house and spent hours there conducting a search. No one revealed what they were looking for. In the same month, however, JP was arrested for assaulting a protester outside the church. So that's the story? The powerful pastor can't handle pressure or being questioned when he's supposed to be unquestionable? And that's when everything starts to fall apart. On December 18, 2025 already, a federal grand jury in Columbia, South Carolina, indicted JP on 2 charges: cyber stalking and making false statements to federal investigators. The indictment confirmed all the points in Mika's police reports and added more, okay? In addition to the trackers, the more than 50 calls, and the financial interference, the prosecutors revealed that JP posted an intimate photo of Mika on the internet, obviously without her consent. In an email exchange, he admitted to doing it. He wrote that he wanted to hurt her because she was there, telling other people details about his life. And about the tires, all that tampering with the car, right? To make Mika, I think, believe she was going a little crazy, isn't that it? When the FBI confronted JP, he denied damaging Mika's car tires. But the investigators found out that JP had bought a tire puncturing device online and sent messages to third parties mentioning his wife's vehicle. And there was also something about a private investigator that JP said he had hired to protect Mika from buying a gun. But the federal agents found out that he actually hired the investigator to keep an eye on Mika because he suspected she was cheating. The guy's actions, folks, were clearly predatory, extremely calculated, and caused deep trauma. Does anyone disagree with that? In January 2026, JP appeared in federal court. More than 70 people were in the building. He pleaded not guilty. Bail was set at $100,000 with an ankle monitor, and he was barred from leaving South Carolina. In March then, his defense requested a postponement, and the trial was actually scheduled for April 2026. If convicted, which hasn't happened yet, he will face up to 5 years for cyberstalking and up to 2 years for making false statements, in addition to a $250,000 fine. However, he was not charged with Mika's death, okay? And it really seems like it was just suicide, that's all. Meanwhile, 2 women have filed civil lawsuits accusing JP of sexual assault when they were minors, at the end of the 1990s at a school connected to his church. There are also minor scandals I won't list here, okay? But I think they need to be investigated. Because if he's convicted, if he is, you saw that the sentence is ridiculous, right? But I admit that I was disappointed that he wasn't held accountable at all for what actually happened to Mika. After all, if even half of everything that was investigated and that I told you here is true, she literally lived in hell at the hands of this guy, didn't she? But hold on, it's not over yet, okay? The third wife. Going back a little in time here, to June 2025, 13 months after Mika's death, it was in that month that JP got married for the third time. The ceremony was on a beach with armed security guards. The bride is Susie Skinner, widow of Chris Skinner, a paraplegic war veteran from the Myrtle Beach community. Do you think that's just a random piece of information? Just wait. Chris drowned in September 2021 when his wheelchair fell into a condominium pool. The death was classified as accidental according to the testimony of JP's first wife, Allison Williams. Remember when I said she was a key part in all of this? So, according to her, Chris Skinner, this man who died, supposedly confronted JP 2 weeks before he died, asking him to stay away from his wife and children. Allison wrote that it was chilling to know that both members of the new couple, JP and Susie, had spouses who were dead, and the circumstances that were, at the very least, unusual. None of the couple's 7 children were present at their ceremony, okay? In April 2026, Abigail Francis, one of Mika's sisters, went to the South Carolina Senate and said that Mika did everything they tell a person in an abusive situation to do. She went to the police, filed a report, hired a lawyer, requested a restraining order, prepared the divorce papers, and was abandoned every time she tried to get help. Could it be because of his position as that esteemed pastor? I'm asking you. The church there closed its doors, okay? The property was sold for over $2 million. At the end of April 2024, a fisherman sitting on the riverbank heard someone crying. Little did he know what was behind those tears. Then he heard a gunshot, which symbolically marked the end of an entire nightmare. He didn't know who that woman was, nor what had brought her there. He didn't know that she had tried every possible way to get out of a marriage to the devil. He didn't know that, the next day, that same devil would step up to a church pulpit and ask for silence. Practically a literal silence about his sins. Fortunately, despite everything, the silence didn't last. In the face of this case, which is heartbreaking for Mickey and disgusting on that bastard's part, I ask you, what do you think? Do you think all the loose ends of this investigation are tied up? That shot, what kind of shot was that? It's still here, you know? We can't make inferences, but I don't know. Comment here and tell me what you guys think. Thanks for your company. A kiss from the redhead. See you next episode.